Welcome to Middle Math Academy, Converting Fractions, Decimals, and Percents, level number 4. If you're looking for any additional converting fraction, decimals, and percent practice, please feel free to check out levels 1 through 3 or our most challenging level, level 5. Our learning targets today are I can convert fractions, decimals, and percent. Before we get started on today's lesson, I want you to rate yourself on this learning target 1 through 5. 1 is the least amount of confidence in converting fractions, decimals, and percents, and 5 is the most amount of confidence. At the end of the lesson, we'll come back and we'll rate ourselves again on our learning targets. Once you've rated yourself before the lesson, go ahead and pause the video and complete our opening problem. As a reminder, this video will not go over every single problem. So please make sure that when we're taking notes and going over examples, you're keeping up, writing what I write. That way, when you're practicing on your own, you'll feel confident. Let's take a look at our notes. As our learning target mentioned, we're converting fractions, decimals, and percents. Now, our fraction is actually a mixed number. We have a whole number and a fraction put together, which makes a mixed number. So when we write our decimal, we're going to write 3, our whole number, first, put our decimal, and then we're going to divide our numerator by our denominator. In other words, we're going to do 1 divided by 2. When I do 1 divided by 2, I get 0.5. Now, I'm not going to write that 0. Okay, we already have a 3 there. We're just going to write what's to the right of the decimal, the 0.5. So our decimal is 3.5 or 3 5/10. All right, let's convert our decimals to our percent. To convert decimals to percents, we multiply by 100, or some people like to just move the decimal forward 2 spots. Either way, you'll get 350%. Make sure you have this down. Just to review, fractions to decimals, we divide our numerator by our denominator. Decimals to percents, we multiply by 100. Now that we converted this way, we're going to convert in the reverse direction. So now we have 7%. If we needed to multiply our decimal to get our percent, whenever we reverse that, we're going to do the inverse of multiplication, which is division. So we're going to divide our percent by 100 because percents are always out of 100. So I'm going to do 7 divided by 100, and I get 7 hundredths. Now, similarly to this, whenever we moved our decimal forward 2 spots, if you're going from the percent to the decimal, you could also move it back 2 spots and get 7 hundredths as well. All right, our last conversion is we can use place value to write our fraction. So the way I would say this out loud, because I know the first number to the right of my decimal is my tenths place, the second number is my hundredths place. So the way I could say this out loud is 7 hundredths. And there's a spot at the value of this page as well, at the bottom of this page as well, that has a place value chart. Let's go ahead and take a look at example number 1 and 2. Make sure you have this down. All right, so for example number 1, it says write each decimal in words, use the place value chart if you need help. So here's that place value chart I was referring to. Now for our first decimal, if I plug this in down here, we have 0.02. Make sure you're using pencil if you're using this. So the way I could say this, we have a 2 in the hundredth spot. So in words, I can write 2 hundredths. All right. I'll do the next one with you, and then you'll do this last one on your own. So our next one is 10 to the left of our decimal and 42 to the right. So if we have a number to the left of our decimal, we're going to write 10. Then we're going to write and 42 hundredths. That's a little dash right there. And I'm not going to do this last one with you. Go ahead and complete it on your own. Pause the video, come back once you're done. And let's take a look at example 2. I'll do one of these with you, and then I'll have you complete the rest on your own. I will do the first one with you. So our decimal is filled in. We have 8 in the hundredths place. Okay, so if I were to plug that in my place value chart down here, the way I would say this out loud is 8 hundredths. So when I write it as a fraction, I'll write it that same way, 8 hundredths. I know to go from a decimal to a percent, I can multiply by 100 and I will get 8%. Go ahead and complete the next 2 rows on your own and come back to the video once you're done with both. All right, so we're quickly going to check our work for example 2. To convert 6/50ths to a decimal, you should have done 6 divided by 50 and gotten 0.12 or 12 hundredths. Then you can multiply that by 100 and get 12%. For our third row, we have 85%. Okay, so we can divide 85 by 100. Make sure to not, if you're using a calculator, don't click the percent sign in your calculator. 85 divided by 100 is 0.85. And the way we write that as a fraction is 85 hundredths. Go ahead and flip to page 2. Let's take a look at page number 2. Problem A says, percents are always out of 100. It says, there are 100 squares to the right. How many are shaded? Go ahead and answer this problem on your own. Then fill in this table using that information. Once you're finished, come back to the video. All right. So for our first problem, you should have gotten that there are 42 shaded. As a fraction, that's 42 out of 100. As a decimal, 42 hundredths. And as a percent, 42%. Now, how could we write the decimal in words? We could write it as 42 hundredths, just like we practiced on page 1. Go ahead and complete the rest of page 2. Once you're finished with page 2, come back to the video. Before we move to page 3, I just want you to check your work on C. We have 1 whole on this grid and 12 hundredths on this grid. So as a fraction, you should have 1 in 12 hundredths. As a decimal, you should have 1.12, which we can also say as 1 in 12 hundredths. And then as a percent, 112%. And remember, we just multiply our decimal by 100 to get our percent, which is the same thing as just moving the decimal forward 2 spaces. So if there are any problems you haven't finished on page 2, please finish those, then come back when you're ready for page 3. Go ahead and complete page number 3 on your own. Come back to the video once you finish page 3. Go ahead and complete page 4 on your own. Remember, you have notes on page 1 if you need help. and then come back to the video once you're finished page 4. Pause the video and check your work for the top of page 4. Check your work at the bottom of page 4. You can see in problem A, we shaded 70 out of 100 boxes to represent 70%. And in problem B, we shaded 7 out of 100 boxes to represent 7 hundredths. Let's take a look at page 5. Go ahead and complete the first 3 rows, pause the video, and once you're done those 3 rows, come back to the video. All right, let's check our work for just these 3. I can see the first problem, my decimal is filled in, and it's 3 8/8. So when I write that as a fraction, I'm going to make my whole number 3 because the 3 is in the ones place to the left of the decimal. And then I can label my 8 hundredths. The 8 is in the hundreds place. I also know when I go from a decimal to a percent, I just multiply by 100 and I get 308%. Check your work for that first row. Let's check our work for the second row. I know when I go from a fraction to a decimal, I divide. So I'm going to do 5 divided by 5, which is 1. So our decimal is 1 or 1.00. I'm going to multiply my decimal by 100, or remember, you can always just move the decimal forward 2 spots, and we get 100%. And that makes sense because if you got a 5 out of 5 on a quiz, that means you got them all correct, which equals 100%. All right. So now we have our percent filled in. So if I write 111 as a percent as a decimal, I need to divide by 100, and I get 1 11 hundredths. Just like we move the decimal forward when we're going from a decimal to a percent, you can also move the decimal backwards 2 spots to go from a percent to a decimal. Now we can write our fraction as 1 whole and 11 hundredths. Another way you can write this is 111 over 100. Check your work here. And then go ahead and complete the rest of page 5 on your own. Come back to the video once you finish page 5. Go ahead and complete all of page 6. Once you finish page 6, come back to the video. Let's take a look at our common misconception problem on page 6. Matt said that 7/10 as a decimal can be written as 0.7. Noah said 7/10 as a decimal is 0.07. Who is correct? Explain how you convert fractions to decimals. Let's go ahead and check our work. The correct answer is Matt is correct because 7 divided by 10 equals 0.7. When you convert fractions to decimals, divide your numerator by your denominator. So pause the video, check your work here, and then come back to the video. To wrap up today's lesson, make sure that you answer our 3 debrief questions. In your own words, what did you learn today? Sometimes it helps to look at our learning targets from page 1. How much effort did you put in? Rate yourself 1 through 5, 1 being the lowest and 5 being the highest. Explain. And what do you think is a common misconception a student might make when converting fractions, decimals, and percentages? Once you've answered these 3 questions, we're going to flip back to page 1 and rate ourselves after the lesson for the learning target. So if you flip back to page 1, as a reminder, our learning target is I can convert fractions, decimals, and percents. You already rated yourself 1 through 5 at the beginning of the lesson before we had a lot of practice. Now that you've gotten more practice, I want you to rate yourself again. 1 is the lowest, 5 is the highest. How confident do you feel? And thank you for joining us today at Middle Math Academy. If you're looking for any more converting fractions, decimals, and percent practice, remember we have 5 levels of challenge, and each level comes with a video and a lesson. So feel free to check them out, and I hope you have a great day.